God in heaven, we come to you giving you thanks and praise for this glorious day, Lord. Lord, we thank you for bringing us all here. And as we pray to you, O God, in heaven, through your Son, Jesus Christ, we ask that you continue to bless this organization, Lord. And we thank you for the blessing. We continue to bless our President General and give him strength, wisdom, and courage to carry the great candidacy. For we know, Lord, that his vision comes from you, Lord. And we ask that as we go into this conference, Lord, we ask that it reach the multitudes, Lord, that they will know the truth. As we started that truth on Labor Day, unveiling the truth. Lord, we pray, Lord, that you continue to bless every person in this room. Cover us in your blood, Lord, and cover our families at home. Protect us from the evil that is existing in this society, evil at the highest places that is Lord, and that we do the work that you have chosen us to do for the brothers and sisters. And then I ask that you be upon President General and civil negotiations, Lord, strengthen us to bless the secretary, bless the branch office, bless the organization, all the members, Lord, because for we are your children, we come to you serving. Which very makes you Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Right. Once what?
Once it's talking about
What does that mean? What?
you
Oh, you can hear?
pick up from here if you talk.
Oh, okay, all right. Maybe you could speak at any level, you know. All right. What's the thing with it? Thank you very much, and good afternoon, and welcome to this very brief statement of concern from the Office Workers Trade Union this afternoon. And thanks to you, members of the media, for exhibiting extreme patience as you wait on one of your colleagues to arrive. Right, so we appreciate that. We call this media conference here this afternoon to raise serious concern with a statement made by the Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs last night at a public meeting in Point Fortin. We find it to be very troubling that at that meeting, that public forum, the minister would have used that stage to alert the country and whoever else were paying attention to his knowledge of an outcome of a process that has not been completed as yet. I wish to state that the Office Workers Trade Union has incorporated a company by the name of Patriotic Energy to get involved in the bidding process and to acquire the refinery and all of the other assets at Point-a-Pierre for the purposes of providing fuel, energy security, and also revenue foreign exchange for Trinidad and Tobago. It's the first point we want to make, a point that ought not to be lost on the population because it's a point that we were making from inception. And that we are in that process, but we are bounded by what is called non-disclosure agreement, meaning that any part of the process that has a requirement for us to provide certain things, we are not to speak about that publicly. We are not to speak about what stage we are in the process, who are members of our consortium. All of those things we are not supposed to speak about because we are bounded by non-disclosure agreement. And so we find it passing strange that at a forum, a public forum last night in Point Fortin, the Minister of Energy, the Honorable Franklin Khan, would choose to make a statement, and I want to quote directly from that statement. Garakara Refining, quote, Garakara Refining and Terminaling facilities is very likely to be leased to a private operator. Very likely an international operator because there is no indigenous capacity to run a refinery of that size and complexity. We will be focusing on heritage, end of quote. Now there are many things wrong with that statement. Many inconsistencies, many many untruths about that statement, but the one that I want to primarily focus on this afternoon is the one that says that the refinery is very likely to be leased to a private operator. Now, that is specific. That is specific because it speaks about an outcome that is very likely in a process that we are engaged in, parties are engaged in, that is not nearing completion as yet. And that the requirement of non-disclosure in that process requires government's official, Prime Minister et al., not to be speaking about any outcome or any part of that process. Now, the Minister of Energy, in relation to what we are describing here this afternoon, is not no ordinary minister. He has the responsibility for energy and energy affairs, under which portfolio the whole question of Petrotrin, former Petrotrin, and what is the future of Petrotrin, all of that falls under his portfolio. And so for him to be speaking out, talking about an outcome, predicting that it is very likely to be given to a foreign operator, and he went further to talk about the condition under which that will be given, that is to say, it is under a lease arrangement. It seems to us, and all who are paying close attention, and all who are prepared to be without bias, it seems to us that the minister knows something that we don't know. It seems to us that the minister is choosing or has a preference for one or the other bidders in the process. And it seems to us that the minister has a special qualified interest in that process on behalf of some foreign operator. And we take serious umbrage, serious issue with that this afternoon, and we ask the question, what is really the case? Because it contradicts greatly with what we know to be the truth and the facts surrounding where this entire process is at the moment. Is it another parallel process that the minister is engaged in, that he knows the outcome already, and that process is contrary to the one that we are involved in, our company is involved in, putting together a bid for the acquisition of the refinery on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago? Is it something different? Well, the minister, not just the minister, but the government needs to clarify its position. We take note, careful note of what was said by the Prime Minister after the minister spoke. And although the Prime Minister did not go down that road, he did not correct what the minister said. And therefore, what the minister said prior is left hanging. And so we call on the Prime Minister to clarify the government's position today. Is it what he said, or is it what the minister said? Is it that an outcome has already been decided and that parties are now just encouraged to go through the motion, and then at the end of the day, these assets will be given to a particular or preferred entity? Or is it that the process that we are engaged in is a fair one and one that would allow for the best possible entity to acquire the assets on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago? Which one it is? We take very, very serious concern with that. We had been, from then to now, last night to now, we have been inundated with calls and so on, and queries and expression of deep concern for that statement made by Minister Khan. Now, Minister Khan, in our view, in our respectful view, is an alien to the truth, whichever planet that truth come from. And therefore, it is no stranger to us to hear him, Minister Khan, utter false and erroneous statements. But at this part of this serious process, this very, very critical stage of this process, for him to be making those statements, we have known the minister to have interest which in our view does not satisfy the interests of Trinidad and Tobago. So we are very concerned at this point in time, what is really the government's position with these assets, particularly the refinery at Point-A-Pierre, because that is what he was referring to. And may I say, for good measure, that he referred to a refinery of that size and complexity. First of all, let me just say, Minister Khan has absolutely no experience in refining and marketing and so on. He never did work there. And so let me also say that from inception, throughout all of the years, when that company, described as Petrotrin in its latest incarnation before it was destroyed, that company, Petrotrin, would have amassed billions of dollars, over $60 billion, and that could have only been achieved on the backs and shoulders and the brains and the competence of indigenous people here, Trinidad and Tobago, working so that the country would have benefit, of course, under different management. But further, it is only when Malcolm Jones, the PNM Malcolm Jones, which Minister Khan did not refer to, would have come in with all of those failed projects, failed to complete projects, WGTL and so on. When you put all of that failed package together, and when you put the political interference into the management of Petrotrin by both UNC and PNM over the years, the result is where Petrotrin ended up. And that has nothing to do with indigenous people, Trinidadians and Tobagonians. Workers working to make sure that that company register a success throughout the years when it did, so that Trinidad would have benefited from billions of dollars in revenue and foreign exchange to keep this country going. So, tell us, we call on the government of Trinidad and Tobago this afternoon. We call on the Prime Minister himself to clarify the position, clarify that statement by Minister Khan. Tell us and tell the country, tell all of those persons who would have inundated us with concerns and calls and so on from last night to now, if Minister Khan's statement is correct, if the government has already taken a decision to lease the refinery to some foreign operator, or is it that the process that we are engaged in, is it a correct one? And if the latter is the case, that the process that we are engaged in is a correct one, a fair one, and that we can see an outcome that will benefit Trinidad and Tobago, and that we at this point, as we will throughout this process, are very confident of our proposal on behalf of the people, well then we will go throughout the process and just await the announcement of an outcome which will be beneficial to Trinidad and Tobago. But if on the other hand, that it is not a free and fair process, and it is one that has already been decided, the likes of which Minister Khan described, well then, tell us. But if that is not so, we call on Minister Franklin Kine to hand in his resignation. We have lost all confidence in this Minister of Energy. He must also say to the people, while he at it, that some of his incompetence while he was an employee of Petrotrin also contributed to the downfall of the exploration and production assets of the company. And while he had that, he must also tell the population what reason the police had to call him back in on his last day of work when he was dismissed from Petrotrin, and what precisely he was dismissed for and what documents he had. That's a question we continue to ask. What documents you had, Minister Khan, in your possession that the police had to question you on your exit from Petrotrin when Petrotrin relieved you of your duties and responsibilities for certain reasons? And that's a research that I think is very interesting. But it seems that those persons who failed and who would have done injustice to Petrotrin, they only end up at top positions. Malcolm Jones failed Petrotrin, put Petrotrin in billions of dollars in debt. Today we are still trying to grapple with that. But Malcolm Jones was hailed as some expert. Franklin Kahn failed as an employee of Petrotrin. Left under questionable circumstance. The employees are still asking questions. Yes, former employees are still asking questions, but he is an expert. And he knows what indigenous people could do or can't do. Clearly, he could not have made any significant mark to have Petrotrin progress while he was an employee then or while he is a minister now. And therefore, we come back to the question, the original question. Is it a done deal where the minister has information where some foreign interest is going to have the refinery given to them in some lease arrangement? Is that a fact, or is it that the process that we are engaged in, one that is fair and one that we can continue with? Thank you very much for covering what we consider to be a very, very critical concern. Questions? Well, we are not going to that length as yet, except to say that it's a good question because we have already engaged our lawyers with this statement that came out. This statement cannot be allowed to go by without a challenge and a query, an expression of concern. Cannot. Yeah, this is a minister who lied to the population, who misled the population with respect to salaries and so on, with respect to Petrotrin's incarnation from inception to the time that he would have supported its closure and so on. This is a minister that is bankrupt of ideas. Yeah? But this is the Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs that we are stuck with at this point in time. But unfortunately, this is the minister who says to the population that as far as he could see, as far as his knowledge carries him, that a foreign is most likely, and let me quote, is very likely to be leased to a private operator, one that is of foreign nature. International operator, because there is no indigenous capacity to run a refinery. I want to say that there is no indigenous capacity to run the Ministry of Energy and Industry contained in the ministry right now.
Now, he said that there's no indigenous capacity, but do you think that's a fair statement given that when it became a state, it has only been a state company since until it was owned by Shell and Exxon and several companies. I mean, this has been in state company since. So is it a fair statement given that no private company or no private services has been allowed to operate it?
I think it is totally unfair and unjust, but it is geared towards pointing the minds of the population in a particular direction, which direction aligns itself with his knowledge of who is going to get it. Yeah? So he was preparing the population for what is a fait accompli on the part of the government. And that is how we are reading that, unless it is clarified and condemned. We condemn that statement outright on behalf of all of those hard-working and competent Petrotrin employees throughout the years that would have contributed over $60 billion to the national coffers. The story, as far as the government is concerned, it never starts from the beginning. No. It always starts somewhere in the middle or close to the end. But the story has a beginning, and it has a middle, and it has an ending. The story is far from over, but the story has not been properly told. And I had said on Labor Day, and I maintain, that at the appropriate time, we are going to tell this Petrotrin story in its entirety, from beginning to end. In the meantime, we are engaged in a process, which process have us signed and bounded to non-disclosure. And that is why we can't take the liberty to talk about the entire process at this point in time. But rest assured, we are going to tell the story, the fullness of that story for the population. Yeah?
It doesn't
Well,
Friday.
yeah, we are bounded by non-disclosure agreement insofar as that is concerned. Except to say that you would recall not too long ago where the same minister he came out and he made certain statements about those same assets. And those statements were contradicted a little later on by the Prime Minister. I just want to say, insofar as that statement is concerned, that, what did you say, the Prime Minister said?
And he says that the Paria and the Ibarra are doing it. They go together.
Yeah.
Because they were being seen to be assets.
We are bounded by non-disclosure, but I just want to say that we agree with that statement the Prime Minister made. Yes? We fully agree with that statement. But we disagree vehemently by any statement coming from this dishonest Minister of Energy, because we have known him in his incarnation as an employee, and we have known him in his short stint as a minister to be very, very, very economical with the truth. In fact, we feel that he is totally alien to what are really the truth and the facts around this matter. It's the same minister that talks about a carpenter. He lies with a smiling face for everybody, tells the country that a carpenter earns $70,000 plus a month. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine that? Yeah? And I am at pains to understand how people from Point Fortin who are impacted directly with the closure of Petrotrin would clap when the minister says to them that a foreign operator is most likely going to get their refinery on lease, which when that happens, if it is allowed to happen, they would not benefit. I am at pains to understand how the Point Fortin people could clap for such a statement like that. Yeah? We challenge the minister to a one-on-one debate and conversation on all of those claims that he are making, because all of those things are in the context of very, very poor and bad management executed over the years. Very, very poor management. And that is why we had called for, before this government came into office, and before the other one, we had called for aggressive restructuring of the Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago, so that we could root out all of the areas we feel that is not beneficial to the company, and to have a company that is operated in a most efficient way. And I just want to say, I want to compare, I'm tempted to compare what he earns for doing nothing, for working against the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But I want to ask another question. I don't know if he answered the question as to who owned the building in Faizabad, opposite Lomtac Hill, that earns millions of dollars in rent. Yeah? Who owns that building? Yeah? And who is fighting for it right now? That's a question. Well, first of all, there was no direct communication coming from the Prime Minister officially. There was no direct communication coming from the Prime Minister officially inviting us to a meeting to discuss anything of that nature. There's a protocol that we observe when we are engaged, where the public knows. Where the public knows that we are meeting and for the purpose that we are meeting. That has always been the procedure, and that was not the procedure. On the other hand, no government can claim that this President General or this union would have been in some secret meeting discussing the business of the people. That's not how it's just not our nature to do that. We do everything publicly, yeah, and very transparent so that the public will know whether they agree or disagree. And so that has not happened. There was no direct or official invitation. No direct invitation from the Prime Minister, verbally otherwise, or no official invitation coming to the OWTU. Well, there's a lot of things that come through Minister Young that we are not very, we don't trust. We no longer trust Minister Young. Yeah, so when Minister Young says something, we no longer trust him at all. Yes, but I told him, get it official. Get it official. You know how we meet. We are not prepared to. If you come to me and tell me that you want somebody want to meet me in some sort of arrangement that is not transparent and is not the practice, I tell you, get it official. Send an official request, and everybody will know we are meeting and what we are discussing. And this is a kind of country where people will set you up. Yeah, set you up. And we are happy to date that we did not accept that invitation because we would have been set up. Yeah, we would have been set up. Yeah? We contributed and will contribute to any committee that is properly well constituted and properly well executed and properly well and transparently well announced. We will contribute because that is for the development of Trinidad and Tobago. We are for that. Yeah? Well, we wouldn't be in any little cozy corner anywhere having dinner talking the people's business. That is not how we talk the people's business. How we talk the people's business is in a serious way, in a room with serious people, yeah, dealing with the facts. So this President General would not be in any secret meeting with anybody talking anything about Trinidad and Tobago. That's not how it works. Not how it works at all. Yeah. So we respectfully decline that type of arrangement. Then, now, and into the future. As a matter of fact, I want to remind all that I respectfully decline invitation from whence it came to now and into the future to be on any board of any state enterprise because we want to preserve the independence of the office of the President General. Yeah. Different kettle of fish when it comes to this pristine organization, this institution called the Office Workers Trade Union. And we guard it jealously to make sure that our integrity is maintained at its optimum at all given time. Yeah? Could you imagine what would have happened in a secret meeting or in over some dinner, and then Petrotrin closed down? Yeah? And then, well, I mentioned it to the President General when we were having dinner. Yeah? Could you imagine that? There was absolutely no such meeting. And I would have told that same short Minister Young, Minister of Everything, that listen, no, get an official invitation. That they did not say. They bring half-truths. And they leave the rest of the truth somewhere outside the door and so on. The Petrotrin story must be told in its entirety. The beginning. Can't be no half of Petrotrin. It's the whole of Petrotrin. And we'll be able to say who had interest in what. Yeah. Yeah? Yeah. Who was, yes, Bagman for who? And who left with papers? Yeah. Yeah. And what truth was in the whole issue where 2 ministers was dismissed some years ago? The truth about that, all of that going to come back. Yes. Yeah. You remember a certain fella? Name? Which name I'm not going to call now? Yeah. You could kind of like soak behind it and you can find it. Yeah. So, are we done? I want to thank you very much for responding because this is very important that we put our concerns before the national community, that we are deeply concerned about that statement that was made by the minister last night, that it conjures up the belief in the minds of those who are paying attention that the minister knows something that the rest of the country don't know, in a process that is far from completion when the statement was made, and that it gives the impression that the government has a preference for a particular operator, which is wrong, unjust, it is unfair, not only to the OWTU, but unfair to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah? What it does, it compromises. If left unaddressed, it will compromise and tarnish the process that is now being engaged. Thank you very much.